I am sure you are familiar with that story about the emperor's new clothes, ang bagong damit ng emperador. The story tells us that everybody was silent when the pretentious king came out and paraded himself in public, believing that he was really dressed in the finest clothes, made of the finest fabrics that were so fine they could not be seen by people without culture kuno. He did not know that he had been fooled, na swindle pala. He had been swindled and was now making a fool of himself. But the people were too afraid of commenting or saying anything about the ridiculous truth that they were seeing before their very eyes. They all meekly bowed their heads in reverence to the king, all of them, except a child. Isang bata lang nagsalita, who spontaneously broke the silence, and he cried out, "But the king is naked." Walang damit ang emperador. Today's gospel is about the healing of a man who had lived in silence for a long, long time. How the Lord touched the man's ears and his tongue and ordered them to be opened again. One of the most common reasons why people withdraw into silence when they should be speaking is fear of reprisal. Takot na baka sila balikan. It is the kind of silence that makes the tyrants of this world thrive. The bullies, usually, they would do everything they can to make sure that their victims keep quiet about their experience of abuse. They would say things like, "If you know what's good for you, you better keep quiet. You better not say anything to anybody, not even to your parents. Huwag kang kikibo. Wala kang sasabihin kahit sa magulang mo. Remember, what I can do to you, I can also do to them." Ganyan magsalita ang mga bully. And this is the kind of thing that King Ahab and Queen Jezebel did during their time in order to make sure na walang oposisyon sa kanilang otoridad. What did they do? They murdered all the prophets of Israel, precisely to silence their prophetic voices until no one was left. Walang natira except the prophet Elijah. And even the prophet Elijah, at some point, he got so depressed. He wanted to withdraw into silence and just end his life. What did the Lord do? The Lord sent an angel to keep waking him up and feeding him until he would reach the mountain of the Lord, Mount Horeb, where he would receive a new fire in his belly that would enable him to speak again. The prophet Jeremiah had gone through the same kind of crisis. When he got into trouble for just doing his job, he complained to God. He lamented, and he resolved to just keep quiet. But then, after a while, Jeremiah, the prophet, says to himself, "How can I keep your word? and be quiet. Your word is like fire burning in my heart, imprisoned in my bones. I grow weary just holding it back. I cannot endure it. That's in Jeremiah chapter 20. I'm sure you're familiar with a song composed by Simon and Garfunkel. I think it was Paul Simon who composed it. Ang pamagat ay The Sound of Silence. I wonder if the composer did not have the prophet Elijah or Jeremiah in mind noong isulat niya yung kanta. At some point, the singer himself becomes the prophet. He talks about seeing in the naked light 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking. People hearing without listening. People writing songs that voices never share. And then he says, no one dared disturb the sound of silence. Kasi takot lahat eh. No one but the prophet who dares to cry out in the town square. At ito yung sinasabi niya, fools, said I, you do not know. Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words, that I might teach you. Take my arms, that I might reach you. At ang pinakamalungkot na bahagi dun sa kanta, the saddest line in the song says, but my words, like silent raindrops, fell and echoed in the wells of silence. Pero may final verse pa. He says, and the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. And the sign flashed out its warning in the words that it was forming. And the sign said, the words of the prophets are written on subway walls and tenement halls. Salita ng propeta, nakasulat sa pader, and whispered in the sounds of silence. Well, what Jesus did to the deaf-mute in the gospel today, He did and continues to do to society and to the rest of the world until today. He empowers people to speak out the truth. He tells them never to allow themselves to be cowed or intimidated by fear and to just withdraw into negative silence. Merong isang eksena doon sa triumphant entry into Jerusalem, which we celebrate during Palm Sunday, sa Linggo ng Palaspas. And the Pharisees rebuked the disciples, and they told Jesus to order His disciples to keep quiet. Anong sagot ni Jesus? Luke chapter 19, verse 40. Jesus says, I tell you, if they keep silent, the stones will cry out. Kapag pinatahimik ko sila, ang mga bato mismo ang sisigaw. In the gospel, Mark says, when Jesus touched the deaf-mute's ears and mouth, He looked up to heaven and groaned. Groaned. Ang Tagalog ng groan, umungol siya. Nanaghoy siya. I find it very descriptive of what he was doing. He was, parang hinuhugot talaga niya ang boses ng taong ito. Literally drawing out the man's voice from from deep, deep within. It is what needs to be done. When people have become so used to abuse, they no longer resist or even run away. They just silently bear it. You find yourself groaning from deep, deep within. And you wish you could ask them, "My God, what have they done to you? Anong ginawa nila sa iyo?" People can shut up, not just their mouths or ears, but their minds and their hearts as well. Mas delikado yun. Pag utak at puso na ang sinara ng tao, they can be so deluded or fearful or traumatized, they just would not listen to reason anymore. Walang naririnig dahil ayaw makinig. And so, I understand what Jesus said when he groaned and said, "Be open! Be open!" And he wasn't just saying it like Alibaba, saying it to the magic mountain, "Open sesame," as if it were so easy. Oh my goodness. It is often more complicated than that. Sometimes, we also have to do what Jesus did in order to unlock their psychological chains or their mental prison cells. St. Mark says in the Gospel, Jesus took him off by himself, away from the crowd. Ibig sabihin talagang one-on-one. And sometimes, it is all that it takes to give people the attention that they need if we want them to be healed. Kasi some people have been silenced by rejection. Some people have gotten used to being ignored or taken for granted or not given any attention or not given any importance in society at all. People who are treated like basura, trash. People who are treated like they do not matter at all, as if they did not exist. And you know what? It is the common experience of many poor people. People crying out and nobody hears. I think of people like Zacchaeus. Remember the one who climbed the sycamore tree? I think of people like the blind beggar Bartimaeus. Remember how he cried out, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me," calling attention. I think of people like the woman who was suffering from hemorrhage. Hindi tumatawag ng pansin. Kahit mahaplos ko lang ang laylayan ng damit niya. And what a little attention from Jesus did to them. How it healed them. It opened their eyes. It restored their wholeness. Sometimes, you have to enter into their world before you can get them out of their isolation and introduce them to your world. Meron akong kilala na may anak na autistic. Parang nasa sariling mundo o daigdig ang anak niya. At nagtatantrums kapag naiistorbo. Hindi marunong makipag-socialize. You know what the mother did? She really tried to enter into the world of her son until she could get him out of there and get acquainted with our world. And you won't believe it now, he has developed social skills. Nabuksan siya. Sometimes you have to understand people before you can get yourself understood by them. Silence can mean many things to people. Even if Jesus himself went into silence very often, and silence meant something very positive and empowering for him. But Jesus knew that for some people, silence can be torture. It can be an occasion that unleashes the monsters inside them. Before he said goodbye to his disciples, Jesus gave this assurance. And we read it in John chapter 8. If you remain in my word, he said, you will truly be my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. This text must have been the inspiration of Neil Diamond when he composed that song with the shortest title. Alam niyo yung title ng song niya? B. Yun lang. B. B-E. B. And the song says, be as a page that aches for a word, that speaks of a thing that is timeless. The prophet, is empowered by God to empower his people to strike down the lies and to dare to give voice to the voiceless, to speak out the truth, not in whispers, but from the housetops, like John the Baptist did, until he was beheaded. Like Jesus Christ himself did, until he was crucified. But here's the good news. The voice of truth does not end with the silence of the tomb. It resurrects. It resonates. It is amplified further by more voices. It echoes the creative voice that started with the first command, let there be light, and how it set creation on its course. What is uttered does not remain in the sound of silence. It comes about. It materializes into reality because it is God's creative, God's empowering and liberating voice that can never be suppressed by evil.